Hey everyone, welcome back to the Collector's Compass, the official podcast of Collectors MD, where we explore the intersection of collecting, mental wellness, and responsible engagement in the hobby. I'm your host, Alex Efron, founder of Collectors MD, and today is a continuation of a conversation many of you enjoyed. Back in August, I joined Alijah, better known as HoosierPulls, on his YouTube channel to talk candidly about the state of the hobby, repacks, sudden death auctions, late night bid frenzies, and the way influencer highlight reels can warp expectations. We name the problems, and today we are focusing on building the solutions. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that since that episode, Alijah has been incredibly supportive of what we're building at Collectors MD, consistently posting pieces on social media that model intentional collecting, showing the real process and the joy that doesn't depend on things like scoring a life-changing card or hitting a jackpot. That type of leadership really matters. So if you've ever felt the hobby slipping from joy into compulsion, this episode is your roadmap back. Alijah, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you.
Hey, thanks, Alex. Thanks for the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too, man. We unpacked a lot in a very short time back in August, and we've been in communication since. You've constantly advocated for everything we're doing at Collectors MD, whether it be posting an intentional piece like I just mentioned or resharing a story. Your support has just been incredible, and we are so grateful for you. Hobby, frankly, is a better place when creators like you are in it. So with that, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you, what you do, your background, etc.
Yeah, so I actually started collecting overall when I was a really little kid. I was a huge sports fan, huge Cubs fan, and it seems like cards always work their way into that relationship at some point. So I started collecting cards when I was really little, collected all throughout high school, and then I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17, and then kind of got out of collecting from all the travel and the deployment and crazy stuff. So as I got back into collecting, as I was transitioning out of the Marine Corps, cards are something that really helped me just be able to connect with a community and feel a sense of belonging. And then also the aspect of making videos and creating content is something that I just found so much joy in. So cards and YouTube essentially really helped me move through a difficult point in my life. And the response was just overwhelming. So the channel's coming up on its 5-year anniversary.
Wow.
And I mainly just focus on reviewing products for the most part. That's mainly my bread and butter for the channel. But I do a lot of other things, like I show people how redemptions work, how you can submit claims like damaged and defective cards. Just as I'm having these experiences, I'm trying to make videos to walk other people through and kind of share that with them.
That's awesome, man. And honestly, it's so important to have sort of a objective tone in the hobby. A lot of people like to play devil's advocate. They like to create polarizing content. And so a lot of the sort of tools, resources, pertinent information that help you sort of advance in your hobby journey kind of get lost in the shuffle, right? Because we're constantly just seeing so much content that just is focused around, either negativity or polarizing topics or people, beefing or butting heads. And so it's great that you sort of bring a neutral tone that, again, you review product, but I think you do it in a way that, again, carries that mantra of collecting with intention, right? You're not constantly calling out or naming the comp on a monster card you hit. You acknowledge when you miss. You acknowledge that the hobby can be a challenging place to be at times. And again, just providing that sense of useful information to your audience, I think is really, really great. And I'm sure a lot of them find that very helpful. So with that, I do want to frame this, let's pick up where we left off in August, because
Yeah.
we talked a lot about how things like the short fuse auctions, the mystery repacks with opaque odds, and late night doom scrolling can really pull people into spending spirals, right? And since then, we've heard from listeners as well as our community members. We've grown quite a bit since August, who have woken up to things like invoices that they barely remember authorizing. So I'm curious from that conversation, and I know it's been a couple months now, I think almost 3 months since we had that conversation, but what stuck with you the most from that dialogue?
I think it was really seeing how many people were truly impacted by these issues. I've seen, certain people comment on, your posts and like your videos, and there's sometimes a certain tone that's like, oh, like this is not that big of a deal. But as you really dive into these issues, and hear people's stories and read about their frustration, I realize that this is just a huge problem within the hobby and collecting in general. And it was just really eye-opening to see how many people were truly affected by this, and how many people came forward and said that, hey, until Collectors MD, like I didn't even realize that I was feeding a really bad habit and had a problem. So definitely just the realization that, we're so easily influenced, and we have the capability to just instantly get that instant gratification, whether it's buying or bidding or whatever it may be, and just trying to be like really conscious of that, even within my own life.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And honestly, like what stuck with me was very similar. It's how universal all of this feels, right? When we talked back in August, it wasn't just theoretical. I think it hit home for so many people who have lived that exact cycle, right? The late night scrolling, the just one more bid mentality, the adrenaline that blurs into regret. And what really resonated with a lot of people, I think, was realizing how easy it is for anyone, even the most experienced collectors, to fall into that trap subconsciously. Like you said, they might not even realize they're falling into the trap because the systems are built for it, right? So
Right.
things like the sudden death auctions and timers, the flashing graphics in these live streams, the social pressure and the live chats, these things are all designed to keep you from pausing long enough to actually make an informed purchasing decision. So what stuck with me, in all of these conversations, not just ours, isn't just the problem, it's the response, right? I've seen more people start speaking up over the last couple months. There's been more awareness, there's more accountability, and that gives me hope that we're not just naming the issues anymore. We're starting to build the guardrails that can actually protect people from it. And that's what Collectors MD is all about. So again, I really appreciate you acknowledging that, and uh, you know, taking a notice that this is a real issue, and that creators in this hobby make a real impact. And when you had me on your channel, I was able to sort of shed light on some of this to your audience. I think that was monumental. It doesn't even matter how big your audience is. What I realized is that even if you're just impacting a handful of people, you're making a difference, right?
Definitely.
It could be 5 people, it could be 500 people, it could be 5,000 people. As long as you are making a positive impact, that matters. So with that, I'm curious which mechanics feel both, predatory, but also most fixable right now.
I definitely think that the sudden death bidding, um, is would, in my opinion, be the easiest fix, and is also the most predatory. I recently spoke with a friend, who is just he's recently gotten into cards, and he just commented on how there was a base rookie card that went for like $33 on a sudden death auction, and when he looked up the eBay comps, it was like a $2 to $3 card. And it shot up because people, they get so just frantic over that 5 second timer that goes down. And also, I mean, these platforms really like allow you to just tap to bid higher. Like the bid is already placed for you. You don't even have to like enter a number because it's so fast. Just
Yeah.
whatever the bid is, you can one up it. So I think that is by far one of the most predatory practices, and I think it's one of the most fixable, because the companies that are doing this, they have the ability to, limit their timers. I could understand, say, hey, like we're, having a 5 minute, bid, or 3 minutes, but when you have these 10, some are 10 seconds long,
Yeah. Or
that's
shorter. I'm
yeah,
seeing 5 seconds sometimes.
yeah, it is just really there to shut off the brain of the consumer, and
Yeah.
anything I think that affects your judgment, should not be allowed.
Yeah. 100%. And I want to actually unpack that a little bit more, because these sudden death auctions really are one of the most quietly dangerous mechanics in the hobby right now. You bring up such a good point. On the surface, I think streamers kind of position it, or um, present it to their audience as something that's fun and fast and exciting, right? 10 seconds on the clock, cards flying, chat is all hyped up. But what's really happening is psychological, and it's pressure by design, right? You've got,
Right.
again, the streamers yelling. And when I say yelling, I mean yelling. They are obnoxious at times. Like, these are going too cheap, or come on, chat, don't sleep, like bid, 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 right?
Right.
While that timer flashes like a slot machine, and before you even have a chance to check the comp or think about what you're even bidding on, your brain's already gone into this sort of fight or flight mode, right? It's not a rational decision anymore. It's just straight up impulse. And the wild
Definitely.
part to me is that most people don't even realize it's happening, right? You think you're trying to win a card, but really you're just reacting to the social pressure and this engineered FOMO. You don't have time to step back, open eBay or Card Ladder 130 point, and see the same card, or see that the same card sells for half that price, like you just cited, right? Because by the
Right.
time you try, the auction's already over and the next one started. Nobody can operate that quickly. And that's why I keep saying the issue isn't that people love collecting, it's that the systems are set up to make you chase. So if these platforms truly cared about the health of their communities, they give buyers more transparency and time to make informed decisions, not 10 seconds and a hype man yelling, to just bid, bid, bid.
Definitely.
So such a good point, Elijah. I really appreciate you bringing that one up. And so, if other creators are listening right now, what's one change that they can make today that might reduce harm without actually killing the fun?
I really think that as a creator myself, I think one of the biggest responsibilities is to be transparent about your general financial situation.
Yep.
There are so many people who they rip like so much product, and people have no clue what they do. They have no idea how they're able to do this. They don't know if you don't know if they're putting it all on a credit card and paying it off for the next 10 years.
Right.
So I try to be transparent, along with one of my friends that I do a podcast with called the Card Geeks. His name is Josh. We always say, hey, we are dads. We are full time, working dads going to school. This is just like a little bit of extra income that we have, and the money that we make from YouTube goes right back into reviewing products.
Yeah.
And even saying like, hey, I'm only opening one of these because to open two would just be too much. That would just stretch my budget too
Yeah.
far. And I just think having that transparency and saying like, hey, it's okay that you're not the guy opening up a case of whatever the hottest product is. It's okay to grab one box and have a good time and open it and enjoy the cards. So I think that type of transparency, and if you do have the financial ability to, rip a lot higher end products or rip more products, I would be transparent about that. Say, hey, I'm in a position where I can do this. and it's not hurting me financially.
Yeah. That's a big one. And honestly, it's something I think that the hobby doesn't talk about enough. The problem with influencers ripping product on YouTube um, isn't that they're opening cards per se, it's how they're doing it and what it teaches people to expect, especially if they aren't leading with some of these principles like transparency and accountability, like you're suggesting. So, you'll see a creator open a $500, $1,000, $2,000 box and hit 3 monsters in a row. And it looks
Right.
incredible, right? But what you don't see are the 10 boxes they may have opened off camera that were total duds, right? And I
Right.
know not every creator or YouTuber or influencer is doing that sort of thing, but there are certainly a handful of folks that are. And I just think a lot of these videos might be edited or curated or just
Hmm.
outright sponsored, meaning the boxes may have gone or have been given to them for free or even hot boxes behind the scenes. I know they call them influencer boxes, right? And
Right.
that instantly just changes the dynamic, because when a kid or even an adult collector watches that and sees the hits just pouring in, they start thinking that's normal. They think if I just buy one more box, or if I just buy one box like that, I'll hit big too, right? So it ends up being just this marketing opportunity for the manufacturers and the platforms. If they provide the influencer with a hot box, they open it on YouTube, people are just going to inherently think they can repeat that behavior or
Right.
replicate it. And so they're going to go and buy it. I mean, it's straight up marketing.
Yeah.
But the reality is that's just not how it works. Most collectors don't have sponsorships. They don't have 10 cases sitting behind them.
Hmm.
They're spending their own money, often hoping for a fraction of those results. So these influencer rips end up creating this, illusion that the big hits are common, when in truth, they're just statistical anomalies, right?
Right.
And the fallout ends up becoming real. People start chasing that same dopamine high that we always talk about, buying more product, taking on bigger risks, trying to recreate what they saw online. It's like showing someone a highlight reel of jackpot winners, like just
Right.
winning over and over and over again, and just saying, "Yeah, this is like average casino play." Right? It's not that, and it's not that influencers are necessarily like evil or have malicious intent by any means. It's just that without context or transparency, and I love that you use the word transparency, they set unrealistic expectations for what collecting should or does actually look like. So what
Yeah.
we need are just more creators who show both sides, the hits and the heartbreaks,
Absolutely.
right? The fun and the reality, because the more honest we are about the experience, the healthier and more sustainable the hobby becomes. So such an important theme. And again, I really commend you for paying that forward.
Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate that for sure. It's something that, like you said, it's something that I really respect and I love to see, even though as a creator, you know that you're not going to get usually as much engagement, with the boxes that are terrible. But
yeah,
I sometimes like watching videos where the box is just awful and the person is just honest about it. And they're like, "Hey, this is like the reality of it," but you have to show both sides. You have to show, and I think that that's also a way to help other collectors and consumers make an informed decision.
right,
When you have a product that is just overall just not great, and someone makes the decision to not buy sealed product and save their money and just go after the card they want. I've had so many people be like, "Yeah, I'm so glad that like I saw that this just wasn't worth it for me."
right,
So
yeah, exactly. So we're gonna transition over to our next segment, which is practical guardrails for people, both collectors and couples. Couples is something that we've been focusing on quite a bit recently, just because we've had quite a few spouses reach out to us that are experiencing sort of the fallout of being married to, or maybe in a relationship with an addict or a compulsive collector.
yeah,
We also recently interviewed the wife of one of our community members, Ambre Lavenway. That was the last episode of the Collector's Compass that we filmed last week. And she sort of just shed light on so much of the psychology and, the hardship and the challenges that couples face when going through tumultuous times that include things like addiction, compulsive behavior. Her husband, Travis, actually is also a veteran, disabled veteran at that. So he has gone through quite a bit of trauma. And so it was really, really interesting to sort of just unpack that from the POV of somebody who has been by the side of that type of individual. So
Yeah.
we'll sort of segue away from the diagnosis and focus on maybe a little bit of the defense. So here are the guardrails that we see working for real people, and this includes individuals and couples across both of our lanes of recovery. As you know, we have two lanes. One is abstinence, one is intentional collecting. Abstinence, people who are just looking to step away completely. They can't have a healthy relationship with collecting. They aren't purchasing anything anymore. They're not involved in the hobby in any capacity. They're just on the road to recovery. And then on the other sort of side of that coin is intentional collecting. You know, people like me or you who want to still be involved in the hobby, but do it in a more intentional and responsible way. So for those abstaining completely, one guardrail is self-exclusion tools like our affiliate partner, Gamban, for blocking potentially harmful hobby apps on your phone, apps like Whatnot, Fanatics, Loop, eBay. Obviously, the list goes on. For those looking to collect more responsibly, we have guardrails in place, or we are actively, looking to make these guardrails available across these apps. Things like spend caps per session or week, and automatic cooldowns after losses or high spending, a 24-hour rule for anything over an X dollar amount, no purchases after a certain time of the day, whether that be, in the evening or whichever part of the day, might be the most sort of sensitive for you. Transparent receipts and monthly reviews, so you can see the truth in black and white. And I'm talking about from the manufacturers, from the platforms, and also, on the other side of the conversation, taking those receipts, reviewing them with your spouse, making sure that they have full sight lines into all of this. In addition to that, for couples, things like shared PC lists, complete sight lines into what you're purchasing, what you own, what the associated value is of everything you own. Like, that's really important, right? Because a lot
Right.
of spouses just look at their partner's collection and they're like, wow, there's a bunch of nice baseball cards, but like they have no idea what they're actually worth, right? And so
Right.
that's important. It's important to be transparent with your partner about what your things are worth, from a monetary standpoint. We talk a lot about collecting with intention or with purpose beyond just the financial gain. But at the end of the day, if, the hobby or sports cards are going to be considered by many as an asset class, and you're collecting things that are valuable, it's important to know what you have, and
Right.
just as important for your spouse to know. So, in addition to that, things like pink slip veto, either partner can use, right? Things like
Right.
calendar check-ins and language that removes shame. And so as it pertains specifically to intentional collecting, because I know that's sort of your lane, what has helped you, or let's say your community, your audience, the most?
I definitely think it's as a part of intentional collecting is just having the guardrails of the limits on specific apps. Like I personally have recently put a time limit on the eBay app. As they say, the idle hands are the devil's playground. I noticed that me personally, the more time I scroll on there, the more time that I search, I start to get interested in cards that I normally don't collect.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with expanding your collection or getting into a new side of the hobby, but I just noticed that it wasn't productive at all.
Yeah.
So you can even go in your phone and have a timer set specifically for eBay. And there's apps that you can get to where you can't unlock it unless you have like your spouse, give you a code. And that's also a way to increase accountability. I know that there are so many people who are just such a desperate situation within their relationships because of their addiction
Right.
to purchasing things. And like you said, also the language around it. I know that it's very difficult for, spouses and those around someone to, see the compulsive behavior and see the bank statements and the money spent. Um, but the language has to be non-condemning,
Right.
because like you said, when shame is brought into it, when degradation is a part of that conversation, it really is unproductive for both parties. So I think having those limits, and then also just having compassionate dialogue, with
Yeah.
that person, although it's frustrating, is so important.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the hardest parts, I think, because passion and compulsion can really look similar when you're deep in it, right? When you love this hobby, when it's part of your daily routine, you've made friends, it's a part of your identity. It can be really hard to sort of tell when that passion starts to cross into something that might be a little unhealthy, right?
Right.
You convince yourself you're just investing, or you're committed, but really you're just avoiding that uncomfortable truth that things might start to be getting a little bit out of control. And so I think the reason it's so hard to be or to proactively make changes or set guardrails on your own is because doing that almost feels like you're taking the fun away, right? You tell yourself, if I start tracking my spending or limiting my breaks or limiting my time spent in certain apps, I'm going to kill the excitement. But what actually happens is quite the opposite, right? Those little limits create space for perspective. The problem is you don't realize that until after you've gone too far. And so, passion tends to blind us, and we end up, taking chances, or making risks, or taking risks that are emotionally charged. And when you're chasing something that genuinely brings you joy, whether that's ripping packs, or finding a grail that you've been after, or just being part of a community, it's really easy to justify almost anything. You feel like you're in control because it's your thing. And again,
Right.
we're talking about sports cards, right? This is something that is rooted in childhood nostalgia. So it can very, very easily blind you from reality. But the truth is, passion without structure is just the perfect setup for burnout. And that's why
Right.
guardrails are so important. They don't exist to take away your love for the hobby, they exist to protect it. And without them, that same passion that once gave you the energy just starts to drain it. So yeah, it's hard to make changes when you care this much about something. But the real test of passion isn't how far you're willing to go, it's how willing you are to protect the things you love from turning into something harmful that could potentially hurt you, and not just you, but your family.
Definitely.
So yeah, that was a really great point. And so with that, how do you feel like a partner can maybe raise some concerns, or red flags without becoming the quote unquote bad guy?
I think that the way that the initial approach, is brought up is really important, and I think that that should happen through a gentle conversation. Respect is a two-way street. Obviously, if the person is not willing to comply or hear you, that's a totally different, I guess, kind of situation. But being able to say, hey, like this is affecting us, and I want you to be able to continue to do the things that you love. But like with anything, we need to make sure that there are appropriate boundaries. And introducing, making it, you guys have a budget together,
Right.
that you go through. You maybe show interest in what they're collecting. Just when my wife comes in and she's like, oh, like, what are you doing, like, who's this guy, and who's, what card is this looks cool. that is just so fun to share with your significant other, even though they might not be into collecting, just showing, that you support, what they're doing, what they're interested in. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. So well said. I mean, I just think that we've gotten to a point where so many collectors are just afraid to or ashamed to share specifics around their hobby with their spouses.
Right.
We see it everywhere. I mean, this isn't like a once in a while type of situation. Almost every single person that comes through Collectors MD or joins our weekly peer support meetings have experienced something similar to some extent, whether that be hiding packages from their wife or their loved ones, whether it be hiding purchases and receipts.
Right.
You even see people make satires about it on social media. Going to the bathroom for your personal time just to open up packs, things
Right.
like that. But like it's just so important if you want to have a healthy and sustainable relationship or marriage to be open and honest with that other person about your hobbies and everything that you're doing as it pertains to the way you're spending your money. Because if you're not, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And
Definitely.
I could share that from my own lived experience, and so I'd love for you to give our listeners maybe one experiment that they can try this week. It doesn't necessarily have to do with you know, their marriage or their relationship, or even guardrails, but maybe just something small that could make a big difference.
Yeah, something that I recently did that really shifted my thinking, and helped me. There was a card that I was dead set on. It popped up. It was in my save searches. I was looking for it for a long time. It came up, and I was like, hey, like, if this card goes over this specific amount, I'm just gonna unwatch it. Like, I don't even
Interesting.
want to see what it sells for. If
Yeah.
it goes over the amount, like, I'm not even gonna give myself the temptation to watch it all the way down, to the final bid. And it did. It
Right.
went over. It didn't sell for super crazy amount, but like my limit was like $75.
Yeah.
And I was like, as soon as it goes over $75, like, I'm taking it off.
Yeah.
And I did. And it kind of hurt like a little bit because I was like, man, I don't know when that card's gonna pop up again. But then also I was like, I feel so, like, just relieved and free at the same time to be like, I don't, at the end of the day, like, I didn't need it.
Yeah.
It's cool, it's great to have, but just walking away completely, watching it disappear off my watch list, it was just, I don't know, it was really, it just really, like, enforce the idea that, like, hey, I really am in control of my spending. I'm in control of, the decisions I make, and that's was just like a really positive reinforcement. So
Right.
I would recommend, doing that. Even if you're not necessarily struggling with spending and eBay and whatnot and all those things, but set a limit, and as soon as that card or that product goes over, just cut it loose. And I think the results are going to overall be positive.
Yeah, well said. I think what you're describing is restraint. It takes a lot of restraint to do something like that, right? Because I think naturally, as human beings, we're just always curious, right?
Yeah.
We always want information or want to learn about things that we don't know the answers to. And so, even when it's something as trivial as the final auction price of a bid that you're watching, it's hard to just go in the other direction and walk away when you
Right.
can very easily just engage, bid on it yourself, or at least see where the auction ends. And so again, I think that takes a lot of discipline, self-discipline, restraint, and those are principles that I think our community can absolutely start leveraging more of, because I think restraint and self-control are very, very hard to command when you're deep in the cycle of
Right.
things like addiction and compulsive spending. So I do love that one. I kind of wish that eBay or any auction platform sort of gave you that option where if you're watching an item, if it surpasses a threshold, it just you automatically unwatch it, or
Yeah.
maybe it's even blocked from your platform, so you can't even see it
Right.
anymore. Like you set sort of a limit as far as like the price of an item that you're allowed to see on the platform, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one. I've never thought about that, but I think that's something that maybe we could table for potential conversation with some of these live auction platforms that we've been proactively reaching out to. Awesome. So we're going to transition over to the next segment, which is platform and breaker guardrails, with a focus on our industry reform initiative. So just zooming out, taking a step back, our industry reform initiative lays out pretty simple and common sense standards. These are things like age verification and licensing for sellers, conflict of interest bans, odds, print run ranges, format disclosures that are upfront and not just buried in the fine print. Things like timer reforms, no perpetual 10-second loops designed to sort of hijack that impulse like we were just talking about. Verified randomization with audit logs, real-time receipts, VOD archiving, refund and dispute frameworks that protect both the buyer and the breaker. And so, Alijah, I'm curious, which of these items do you feel like would be sort of the biggest win in terms of it being implemented into the current infrastructure with the least amount of friction, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that something that we've already seen, that I would definitely call a win, is how Whatnot has begun to restructure their repacks, and basically having an audit of the seller, what they're selling. There can only be approved items, and there has to be an upfront odds sheet,
Yeah,
as well as an active checklist, that shows what has been, pulled, what is still available, if it's more like on the digital side. But I think that is one of the biggest things that can be implemented with the least amount of friction, and just has such a massive impact,
yeah,
on the overall community, because the people who were scamming the system and doing God knows what with the chase cards, and making all sorts of money off these packs, there's now a level of accountability that it makes it a more fair playing field for the buyer,
right.
and makes forces the seller to be transparent. So I think once we see that kind of universally across the board, I
Yeah.
think, that's a massive win for the hobby community.
Yeah, and for those of our listeners that don't know what Elijah's referencing, on October 1st of this month, Whatnot introduced basically regulation for repacks and surprise products on their platform, right? They now require or will require, I think, starting November 3rd, things like approval, independent auditors, public checklists, and frankly, it's a long needed step toward transparency and accountability in the hobby. And I actually kind of want to unpack this a little bit more, no pun intended on the unpack
Yeah.
repack. But here's how I see it in sort of plain terms. So Whatnot's new regulation, I think, is definitely one of the first real steps towards cleaning up one of the messiest corners of the hobby.
Hmm.
Obviously, for a long time, anyone could throw random cards into a pack or a box and call it, a mystery repack and sell it with absolutely zero oversight. And that's, where a lot of people are getting or have been getting burnt, right? $500 for what ends up turning out to be $30 at most in bulk
Right.
cards. And there were no odds, there's no checklist, no accountability, none of that. So now Whatnot's saying, okay, if you want to sell repacks, you have to follow actual rules, which is, it's crazy that it's taken until
Right.
October of 2025 for this to finally be rolled out, given how big Whatnot is as a platform and how many people this has been affecting for years. But sellers now have to list what's inside, get that approved by an outside source. They have to provide checklists. They have to meet certain packaging standards. And so on paper, I think that's great. It's a great thing. Like you said, it forces transparency. It gives collectors a little more protection, finally. But we have to be real. It's not a complete fix. It's not something that is like 100% makes the hobby a safe place
Right.
all of a sudden. Like, the platforms still thrive on FOMO and speed and a lot of the things that we've already unpacked. So even if a repack is technically approved, you're still dealing with these same hype mechanics, the flashing timers, the influencers yelling, this case is loaded, case hits still live, or case is hot, whatever, tactics they use, and buyers feeling like they've got 10 seconds to make a serious purchasing decision. And you don't have time to check comps or think. It's impulse by design, again, like we just discussed. So I think it's progress for sure, but it's just also really complicated. I think small breakers and independent repack sellers are definitely going to feel squeezed, and some will probably just jump to another platform where the rules are looser. And just because something's regulated doesn't mean that it's still fair value. It just means it's audited. I mean, like, they can't audit or control a player injury or a scandal or something that can happen after the fact, right? And so I'd say, like, it's a solid first step, but not by any means even close to the finish line. And we want to give credit where credit is due. Whatnot definitely deserves some credit for at least acknowledging there's a problem. But the deeper issue, the way content, urgency, and reward are just engineered to drive compulsive behavior, all of that just needs work. And so if this leads to a cultural shift towards things like honesty and disclosure and responsible design, then it's a win-win. But if it's just policy on paper, while the hype train just keeps rolling on, we're sort of right back to where we started. So to an extent, it just feels like Whatnot is kind of just sipping the Kool-Aid, doing what Jeff Wilson is doing with the PSA repacks, and responding to something that has been so glaringly like obvious for years, and then positioning themselves like they're the heroes just because they're just all they're doing is just meeting a standard that hasn't been met for the longest time. Like, that's sort of the part I have a little bit of a problem with. But again, that is a topic that I think we can unpack for hours if we wanted to. So we'll table that for now. Okay, so creators like you, Elijah, I think really set culture in a lot of what we do. And so what transparency do you wish was sort of universal? And I'll give you some examples. Things like sponsorship labels, expected value context, things like that. Like, is there anything that comes to mind that you feel like might make more sense for creators to start being more honest and open about?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the sponsorship transparency is something that needs to be addressed. Whether it's something as minor as card supplies, or you're getting boxes sent to you, that needs to be communicated to the audience. And that's something that I really commend the channel Run Good Life. He did a creator challenge a few years ago, and he challenged every single creator to name the purpose of why their channel exists, first of all, and then to give a list of all the sponsorships or any product or item that they have a stake in. Whether you have a code that gets you a specific percent off, and that creator gets a cut of it. So I think having that transparency is really important. So that's something I stress to my community. I'm part of the card shells like creator kind of partnership. And that's something that I always say, be like, hey, I'm part of the Card Shells partnership, and it's because I specifically use this product and I love this product, and that is that's the reason why I've partnered with them.
Yeah.
But for anything else, it's like, also don't you know I've had platforms reach out to me, things that I'm not saying like, hey, look at Elijah, he's such a great upstanding guy. But I recently had a platform reach out to me, and I didn't agree with what they stood for and their mission and things like that. And I just told them, I was like, I don't want, any of this. I don't want any part of
Interesting.
this. Like, I appreciate the offer, but that's not who I am, and that's not who I represent. So
Interesting. I definitely want to ask you more about the card shelves. Maybe that's a conversation we can have,
yeah,
um, post show here. But that's definitely an interesting point, and I'm glad you brought up RGL, Run Good Life. I agree. I think he's one of the better influencers in the hobby space, and he does a really great job of being brutally honest about everything as it pertains to
right.
the hobby, whether it be the value of the product that he's opening, whether it's a good product, bad product. He quite often just gets completely manhandled by
Yeah.
the product he's opening, and he's very forthcoming with that. He doesn't sort of sugarcoat it, and I always really appreciated that about him. And so he was actually one of the first individuals I reached out to this year when I rolled out Collectors MD,
Yeah.
because I wanted to potentially collaborate with him on some content. And he got back to me, and I'm happy to just share this. And he basically said, like, I don't necessarily think there might be an opportunity for us to collab. He said, I do find your content a little too preachy. I think there are anti-breaking undertones, and above all else, I do very few partnerships and collaborations with anyone in the industry. And so I was really surprised that he took that approach, because he struck me as like one of the individuals that would want to promote sort of
Right.
responsible ripping and a positive change. And this isn't like, a means to like call him out or like say that he's wrong or anything like that. Like, I totally get it. At the end of the day, like, he's a breaker, right? And
Right.
so if a platform like Collectors MD is coming into the fold and talking about things like, abstinence or, scaling back your spending, I can understand how that could potentially jeopardize the revenue, especially for, one individual who's operating a small business. So
Right.
there's no sort of resentment or hate or anything like that in regards to his response. And like, I was very uh you know cordial and understanding and how I got back to him. But with that being said, like, there are a handful of creators that are doing it the right way, but don't necessarily want to get behind this movement because it could
Right.
potentially, jeopardize their livelihood, and we get that. And so this isn't like an environment that's like high pressure, where like, if you don't partner with us, if you don't get on the responsible collecting train, you're going to be left at the station. Like,
Right.
that's not what we're trying to instill within the hobby. We just are putting our message out there, and for those organizations or individuals that want to get behind it and collaborate on responsible ripping messaging, creating guardrails, industry advocacy, all the things that we talk about, we're all for it. And we're already seeing quite a few of card shops, breakers, creators, influencers, etc., start to warm up to it and implement some form of messaging around responsible ripping. And I don't know if you knew this, but Jeff Wilson had me on a show over the summer, or towards the end of the summer, and right then and there, he basically said, Cards HQ, here at Guards HQ, we want to look out for our customer. And so, yeah, let's work together. Let's work with Collectors MD to roll out some responsible messaging. So over the last couple months, I've been working with Jeff and his team to develop some messaging that he can integrate into his or across his channels, his ecosystem. We have a handful of other card shops and LCSs that are willing to work with us to do the same sort of thing. So we are seeing a lot of traction in that department, as opposed to, what I was a little bit afraid of, which was sort of like the, friction or response that I received from RGL. But nonetheless, it's going to be a mixed bag as it pertains to just people's feelings and, opinions around this topic, because we get, at the end of the day, it is a bit polarizing, and not everybody's going to agree. But I do want to convey that the underlying message with all of this is that we are just looking out for the consumer. We want to create an environment and space that's, safe, healthy, sustainable, responsible, all of these words that we always use. At the end of the day, we're just looking out for the betterment of the people within the hobby. Right. That's just so important. So with that, we'll transition over to our next segment. I actually, you know what? I did have one more question for you, as it pertains to sort of the platforms and breaker guardrails. So what should accountability look like when shops ignore basic disclosures?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that there's a right way to call out poor behavior, and there's definitely a wrong way. And you kind of alluded to it earlier. There's certain channels and people that just come in guns blazing, and they have conduct ad hominem attacks on people and just trash them, and do all sorts of nasty stuff, but which I don't agree with. But I fully agree with making that behavior and calling unacceptable and calling it out to the community, whether it be a video or a post, enforcing that shop or whoever it may be to take accountability for their actions.
Right. Yeah, well said. And I think, like, as we evolve as a hobby, as an industry, and hopefully the fanatics and the whatnots and a lot of these players start to implement some more real guardrails, there probably will be more disclosures and more guardrails that breakers and shops have to implement. And we're probably going to see some resistance, some pushback. So it'll be interesting to see what that accountability in real time will look like, but only time will tell. So now we'll transition over to our next segment, which is content culture, from hype loops to honest signals. So one reason why I really wanted to bring you on here, Alijah, is because your example, right? You post personal collection stories, you disclose things like your partnerships and who you work with, and you show, again, the misses, not just the monsters. And I don't just mean that with cards. I mean that holistically with everything you do. And we have a special guest.
Yeah. I apologize for that. That's my 4-year-old.
That's totally fine.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
You want me to repeat that?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay. So one reason I really wanted to bring you on here is because your example, right? You post personal collection stories, you disclose your partnerships, who you're working with in the hobby, and you show not just the misses, but the monsters as well. And I'm not talking about just the cards. I'm talking about holistically with everything you do. And so that's how we sort of retrain expectations. So I'm curious, like, what is your sort of litmus test before posting something like, a new product release or a rip or something along those lines?
Yeah. So, I really think that like you said, it's important to showcase the misses. And what I also like to do is I like to focus on the positive aspects of skipping out specifically on a certain product. I post that a lot. I'll be like, hey, I did not have it in my monthly budget to buy a Topps Finest hobby box this month,
Right.
but this is a really cool card from this product that I was able to buy,
Sure.
for $20 or $30. And I would have been so stoked to hit this card in a hobby box. And I did it without spending $300 to $400.
Right.
So just being able to show that it's like you don't have to open the latest and greatest sealed product. You can find deals and you can find cards that you are really going to enjoy, and just be grateful for at the end of the day, and have that extra bit of cash in your pocket too, which is always awesome.
Yeah. Really well said, man. I'm sure it can be challenging too, because like as a creator, you have to be a little bit, I guess, conscious of what happens if I, go on here and open a box and hit a card that's worth $1 million. Like, yeah, that'd be
Right.
great. That'd be great for virality and, cloud and this and that. But at the same time, like, you're kind of putting yourself out there a little bit. Like,
Right.
like, so I guess, at the end of the day, like not everything you record or film is necessarily live, but you just have to be, I guess, conscious of the type of content that you're putting out there, because you don't know who's watching. You don't know how it might resonate with one person versus another. And I just think you do a really good job of that, sort of the gut check before you actually post something.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I always try to tell people too, like, hey, watch my other videos.
Yeah.
If there's a big card that I hit, I'll be like, hey, like this is awesome. I'm super grateful and super happy. But also like watch my other videos,
Right.
this is very few and far between.
Yeah.
I've hit some really nice, really awesome cards on my channel, but for the most part, like the hits that I get, or it's like, oh, like this is really cool, but it's
Yeah.
not, anything that is like absurd.
Right.
So I've had people be like, oh, like must be nice to get like the influencer box, because you're on YouTube and stuff. I'm like, well, all you got
Yeah.
to do is go to my other videos and you'll see me getting smoked
Yeah.
on
It
on
goes
a
both
bunch of
ways.
different products. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yep.
We got a lurker.
Yep.
She just wants to hang out with dad, so we won't keep you for too much longer.
Okay.
But awesome. So next question: if we were to rewire the hobby content in for 2026, let's say, obviously a lot of change is coming.
Yeah.
The Fanatics takeover is just getting started with the release of Topps NBA 2026, I guess, this week, I think in 2 days. So what would we keep for fun? What would sort of be healthy to keep around versus what should we maybe retire because it just feeds into the compulsion?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's so hard because like you said, as a creator, you want to, it's like I want to provide like really interesting content. I also like want to, put out videos, opening things that people are interested in. But I think like smaller creators who are stretching themselves thin on opening like the more premium products and the more expensive boxes, that are really geared toward breakers specifically.
Right.
They're not these $500-600 boxes are not geared toward the average collector.
Right.
I see a lot of small creators opening up stuff like that that's like super premium, and I would love to see that just honestly kind of go away, um, just because it's like we as consumers and as I guess, partakers of the hobby, like we can also vote with our wallets, of
Right.
what we like and dislike, especially with the Fanatics takeover happening, which is really interesting. I'm interested to see what happens to the prices of these things.
Yep.
Um, but I think just, and especially for creators, showing, and this is kind of an idea that I've wanted to start, like, showing the price of a hobby box and then showing what, you could have bought, for that, instead of buying into the, oh, like I
Yeah.
really want to open this sealed product. So I think really just like saying no to the really like expensive boxes, that only yield a few cards because, your return on fun, as we like to call it, is very low. You
Right.
don't have the experience of opening, some boxes have 36 packs. And you get to, enjoy it. Some people don't open them all at one time. But these products that have 3 cards in it, for $500, you open it, you look at it and you're done.
Right.
And then usually the regret sets in, like, oh man, like I just spent $500
Yep.
on this. So that's kind of like what I would like to see.
Yeah. I agree. And, in addition to just the quick hit boxes, you also have product like, Absolute Football, or, what's another one? I guess like Donruss, where
Donruss,
you're
yeah.
you're really only chasing the kaboom and the downtown, and everything else is kind of
Everything
just
goes on in
fluff,
the garbage, yeah.
right? For the most part. I
Mhm.
mean, whereas like a product like, Donruss Optic Basketball that has multiple case hits, both in hobby format and retail format, but you can also hit beautiful parallels of the top rookies and
Right.
vets, and they have, nice inserts. Like, that's something that, might be more appealing or even accessible to the average collector. I know the prices are still really, really high for
Right.
a hobby product, but even in the retail format, like I've seen some pretty decent cards come
Yeah.
out. Obviously, you can hit the downtown, but like it's not just about that downtown chase,
Yeah.
right? It's about hitting a card that means something to you. Like,
Definitely.
I know a lot of folks that are collecting Stephon Castle and Matas Buzelis and Jared McCain. Like, these are some
Mhm.
of the marquee rookies in this past year's rookie class. And like, yeah, you might hit a numbered card at a retail that's only worth like 10, $15 of Castle or Buzelis, but like, that's still something that, could be a fun experience if you're doing it
Yeah.
with a friend, a family member, your kid, your parent, whoever, right? And so that's what it should be about. I agree. And like too often, people are just buying hobby boxes or first off the line boxes or whatever format to just chase that jackpot
Right.
lottery ticket.
Right.
It's just turned into a giant glorified scratch off, and that's not what the hobby was intended to be, but it's what it's
Right.
become. And so Fanatics has an opportunity now, and this is something that we've talked about extensively across all of the content that we put out, to reimagine the hobby in responsible ways, as opposed to just focusing on the next big hit,
Yeah.
or the profit gain, or the hottest ticket insert or
Right.
athlete, or whatever's hyped in the moment, right? And that's really important. And I really hope that Fanatics has people at the helm who understand that, and will hopefully see content like this to make more sort of informed executive decisions as they roll out new product, new concepts. I did a daily reflection yesterday about the redemption process
Mhm.
and ways that we could potentially sort of innovate. And you know what? If you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly share it with you, because I think
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
brought up how you share sort of the redemption process with your audience, and tips and tricks and such. And I think this might resonate. So I won't read the whole thing, but I kind of talk about the whole sort of IOU era of collecting, right?
Yeah.
And how it's just become a very broken and clunky process, right? And so, um, I acknowledge how I want to be fair to the manufacturers, and not every single athlete signs their cards, and it can be virtually impossible to fulfill every single autograph, yada yada. But fairness goes both ways, and so instead of accepting the
Right.
status quo, let's reimagine what redemption fulfillment could look like if the industry actually evolved with intent, placing creativity and collector experience at the forefront instead of convenience and cost cutting. And like, for an industry that is driven by quote unquote innovation, this shouldn't be a tall order, right?
Right.
We can do a lot better than just like black and white box replacements by Panini, or simply extending redemption expiration dates by a decade, which, Fanatics announced last year
Right.
as something that was like so ground shattering, like earth shattering. Like, let's be real, like that's not really moving the needle. If anything, I thought it was a little bit of a satire. Like,
Right.
oh,
Right.
you just got to wait another 10 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, I get why they did it. It's so that older product still has shelf life, but still, it's like tacking a 10-year extension onto a redemption is not the answer. So I
Right.
basically said, like, what if instead of a plain white filler, we receive something worth keeping? A thoughtfully designed insert that actually fits the set, a piece with aesthetic and emotional value, a redemption that isn't a disruption or a burden, but a continuation of the story. The code could even be invisible or scannable, something secure, seamless, and non-destructive, because no collector should have to scratch away a card's beauty just to claim what they were already owed. Redemptions don't have to be symbols of disappointment. They could be reminders of trust, evidence that companies make billions off of collectors actually care about the collector's experience. And then I just go on to say it's 2025. We have self-driving cars,
Right.
supercomputers in our pockets, AI reshaping entire industries, but yet we're still somehow stuck scratching cardboard for IOUs passed off as redemptions, right? So
Right.
anyway, the idea here is like, why can't they just come up with like an innovative concept where instead of a standard redemption, there's a really cool looking insert that you can keep as like a memento in addition to
Right.
the redemption,
Right.
right? Why does it have to be on like a standard piece of white cardstock, and like that you just throw away after you scratch? I never
Right.
understood that, but anyway, I digress. The whole idea here is that it's up to the big players, the Fanatics, the whatnots, the even Paninis, even though they're losing their license, to be more mindful of the collector and focus less about every single possible cash grab. Um, awesome. So I want to make sure that I've covered every single question here. Okay, so one last question on this segment for fellow creators. What is one tweak to keep content entertaining while also being responsible?
Yeah, I think that just all kind of depends on the creator, and kind of leaves it up to them where they want to. Yeah, the it really leaves them up it really leaves it up to them where they can be innovative and creative in this space. So just something that comes to mind is, I guess, try to find a transparent way to show your audience what they're getting, that just goes beyond the monetary value.
Yeah,
That's, I mean, we love collecting cards. We love the stories behind the players. I think that people are starting to get back into the love of just, the designs, and just like getting a base rookie like you were talking about. Really, just really conveying that it's like, this is what we love to do. Like, we can love opening just the regular cards. We can enjoy, you know whether you want to put a set together, or um complete a rainbow, if you want to. There's all different ways that you can enjoy the hobby, within your own safeguards and your own
yeah,
guidelines. And it's not up to the other people who are pushing the big hits and the big products, that you can watch that and enjoy it for what it
yeah,
is, but you can really create your own way of truly enjoying the hobby that is unique to you.
totally. And I think you're already doing that, Elijah. I'll give RGL another quick plug because I know he's somebody who, collects Seattle Mariners
Yeah.
players. He's a big Seattle fan. He builds rainbows. He buys the $2 $5 cards. In addition to chasing big product, I mean,
Yeah.
he kind of covers all grounds when it comes to collecting, but he sees both sides of it. He sees value in the low end, he sees value in the high end, and I think he does a really good job of conveying that and sharing that with his audience, which,
Yeah.
to your point, I think is just really, really important. That perfect combination of entertainment and responsibility, accountability, just goes such a long way when you're reaching wide audiences, especially young individuals that
Definitely.
are so impressionable in this space. All right, so we're gonna transition over to our final segment before we get into the rapid fire round, which is, I promise, very, very quick. But this last segment is called Access to Help, sort of making the on ramp easier for people that are getting involved in Collectors MD. So for those listening, if the hobby stopped feeling fun, you're not broken, you're in a system optimized for impulse. And so here's what the on ramp sort of looks like for Collectors MD. So we host free confidential Collectors MD peer support meetings every Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern, 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific. We just recently, just a couple weeks ago, rolled out a brand new meeting called Unboxed, powered by Collectors MD. That's every Thursday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern and 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific. That's a nice additional touch point for those that just need more, again, touch points throughout the week. And so
Right.
in addition to that, access to licensed clinicians for gambling like behaviors in collecting. Some of our partners are Birch's Health, Right Choice Recovery. We have an expanding referral network of individual therapists, doctors, and clinicians. We also, provide toolkits for shops and breakers, things like responsible ripping touch points in
Yeah.
the form of card stands and spending reminder clips, alongside things like a one sheet with odds, basics, safe play tips, support links, etc. Starter scripts for couples, like we were talking about earlier. Something like, I'm scared, I'm slipping, can we set a no late night rule and review receipts together monthly? And so I'm just curious, like, kind of cover the gamut there. What language helps maybe your viewers, your audience, recognize that fun can easily become a weight?
Yeah, I think that it's um just being honest and kind of blunt, just saying like, hey, um, cards are great, but cards can be detrimental to, your personal and mental health, your relationships. I think just like I said, just being really forward and saying
Yeah.
like, hey, if you need help, if you need to give yourself a break, there are options, there are avenues that you can use to help get yourself back on track. Like you said, whether it's taking a break or stepping back for an undisclosed period of time, just to realign your values and maybe even your budget and things like that. But I think the more that we just get it out and just talk about it in an open and unshameful manner, I think it's going to make it a whole lot easier for people to come forward and use those avenues of help that are available to them.
Yeah, really well said, Elijah. And I do want to, acknowledge that it's not just cards, right, that can weigh you down. It's pretty much anything we can collect, and Collectors ND encompasses all of that. So cards are just one expression of
Right.
a deeper behavior, that drive to chase, to complete, to feel that rush of acquiring something new or surprising that you didn't know moments earlier that you were going to hit. For some people, it's sports cards. For others, it's things like sneakers or watches, comic books, NFTs, even, digital goods in gaming. Like, they have these loot boxes and gotcha games and
Right.
things like that. Or something as simple and traditional as memorabilia. The object changes, but the emotional wiring behind it stays the same, right?
Right.
So collecting starts with curiosity and nostalgia, but it can quietly morph into something a lot heavier than that, especially when it starts feeling an emotional gap. We tell ourselves it's just a hobby, but sometimes we're really just what we're chasing, what we're after is comfort, and
Right.
each purchase becomes a little bit of a distraction, a way to feel in control or to escape a stressful moment. And before you know it, the stuff starts owning you, not the other way
Hmm.
around, right? And so
Absolutely.
the weight isn't just physical; it's mental and emotional. And so the clutter, that's something we talk about quite a bit. The need for more, the guilt when you overspend, the anxiety when you can't figure out or find that next piece, it all builds up, and you start to realize it's not just cars or sneakers or watches that are the weight or that are heavy. It's what they represent, the
Right.
pressure, the comparison, the constant just like having to compare yourself to your peers, the unfinished need to prove something or fill something. And even when you finally do complete that rainbow or that set, very, very quickly after, you're onto something next,
Right.
the next, chase or the next project. And so that's why Collectors MD, or at Collectors MD, we always say this isn't just about sports cards; it's about human behavior. Because truthfully, anything we can collect without intention can start collecting us, sort of
Right.
the other way around, like I just worded. So with that, one last question on this topic. What's one thing you feel like LCS owners can do in the immediate future to surface help without shaming customers?
I think that a preset spending limit option for customers monthly, that you can optionally um, go in there and be like, hey, this is my preset spending limit for this month. Whether you put it digitally, like within their account, if there's a way to do that. I'm sure that someone a lot smarter than me can figure out the logistics of it. But I think that is something that could be really helpful, especially with the accountability of your spouse. It's easy to, especially if you live close to an LCS, to just stop on the way home and grab a couple hobby packs of something. But as someone who um not who owns an LCS, but who lives near one, and I see the same people in there almost every time I go. I think that that would be a great way to offer their patrons some limit to their spending.
Yeah, well said. Like we always say, the hobbyer gets healthy when we do. There is one thing I just want to plug real quick, and that is our Collectors MD flyer, which we just put out last week. And so, if you are the owner or an employee of an LCS, we welcome you to post this flyer, whether it be at your shop or any bulletin for that matter, that allows a public post or a public flyer. This basically is just a call to action. It's very, very subtle, but like if you're struggling with hobby addiction, there's a platform that exists that can provide the support and community that you might be looking for. And so I think it's really subtle. It's not invasive. You just put it on the wall or the door or wherever, and
Right.
it's a great way to sort of direct your customers to a safe place or a safe space if they need it. And frankly, some people are just they need a little bit of support, and so
Yeah,
we're here for those
definitely.
people. So with that, we are going to transition over to our rapid fire round. And so I'm going to ask you a question, or say something. You give me the first thing that comes to mind. All right. We're going
All
to
right.
fly through these.
All
All
right.
right. So, first one rule you'd impose on breaking apps tomorrow.
Spending limits.
Perfect. One disclosure you want to see everywhere.
I would say not every box is a winner.
I love that. One mechanic you'd retire for good.
Sudden death auctions.
I knew you were going to say that. A mantra you use to stay grounded, and I'll give you an easy out here. There's one right below you if you can't think of one.
Yeah, well, I really like collect with intention.
Yeah. Well, that's one of them, but we got
Mhm.
support, accountability, change,
Yep.
and you will see on the ticker here, collect with intention, not compulsion, pops up as well. So I appreciate that. A message to a kid just entering the hobby.
I would say be careful. Be careful and do your research.
Yep. One mindset shift every new collector should hear.
I would probably say it sounds cliche, but collect what you love, not what is most monetary value, has the most
Yeah.
monetary value.
Well said. And lastly, why community, not secrecy, or collecting in isolation, we'll call it, is the best antidote.
Just the support factor.
Yep.
Having that support, having those people around you, to be able to, just walk you through difficult times and rejoice with you in the victories.
Well said. Elijah, thank you so much for joining me today, and more importantly, for the steady support you've shown Collectors MD since August. Your feed, your channel, it models what we preach: intentional collecting, visible transparency, and real joy that isn't held hostage by a case hit. So for our listeners, please go follow Elijah. It's at HoosierPulls on YouTube and Instagram. And if you or someone you love is struggling with compulsion or burnout, join our free confidential Collectors MD peer support group. That's Wednesdays, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern and 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific. Again, we've also partnered with the Problem Gambling Coalition of Colorado to host weekly unboxed, powered by Collectors MD meetings. They're a weekly community meeting focused on safer engagement and honest conversation. And you could find those on Thursdays from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern and 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific. You're obviously welcome to join both. You can also check out past episodes of the Collectors Compass, along with our other shows, Behind the Breaks and Collectors MD features, streaming now on all major platforms and created to keep these conversations alive. Thank you for tuning into the Collectors Compass. And remember, collect with intention, not compulsion. We'll see you next time.
Okay, that was great.
I agree.